I'm going to ask each of our folks to introduce that. Well, first, each of you introduce yourself and your title, your company, and sort of your area as it relates to digital ecosystem and digital transformation.
Hi, my name is Rahul Kapoor. I am Vice President and Head of AI Global Practice at Bosch Center of AI. And my team focuses on applying state-of-the-art AI technology to improve efficiencies in our business functions and create new features for our products.
I am Azita Arvani. I've worked in different parts of digital stack, both with Fortune 500 companies who want to go through digital transformation and also with rapid growth startups that are offering tools for digital transformation. I'm on board of Tenant Company and also advise CEOs and boards on digital transformation. One thing I also wanted to mention, I recently ran the innovation partner and venture management for Nokia. And that's when we did a digital ecosystem with 750 companies. And Spark Cognition actually was one of our star companies that we discovered 5 years ago. And I am delighted to see how great they're doing.
I'm Andrew Coleman. I'm responsible for the commercial aspects of everything we do digitally in aviation. So everything from engaging in business with us to supporting customer journey to fulfilling a lot of the promises we make to the external world. I'm otherwise known as kind of the muscle of the business, in case you wondered.
My name is Ben Bishop. I'm the Chief Digital Architect for Siemens Energy's Service Control and Digitalization business. I'm also on the Siemens IoT Platform Architecture Working Group. My role at Siemens is to create the vision for the future platform for our customers. So we want to deliver the best possible user experience, and we want to do that through having a very versatile technology stack to allow customers to integrate at various points, as well as allow Siemens subject matter experts around the world to contribute content inside of that.
Can you define digital ecosystem as it relates to your company or clients or customers, and also digital transformation? Those are the big buzzwords that we were introduced with. So your quick, concise definitions of those. We'll start with you, Rahul.
So for us, you know, the way we did things 20 years ago is very different than how we do it today. We use a lot of digital technologies in our day-to-day life. And similarly for companies like ours, this means that our business functions, whether it is HR, finance, purchasing, manufacturing, engineering, it has undergone a transformation of using these powerful digital technologies to be more effective and efficient. And of course, it's not about technology itself, it's about people, processes, and several other factors in the ecosystems that make it so successful.
Yeah, so for me, digital transformation is an opportunity for the businesses to reinvent themselves, to focus more on their customers using the latest digital technologies. You know, most people think of digital transformation as, you know, digitalization only, but to me that is a narrower focus. Digital transformation, number one, is a holistic strategy, and it's about the customer, and the efficiencies come when you use the digital enablers.
So our founder, Thomas Edison, kind of inspired us to think really, really big from the beginning. And so digital transformation for us has been kind of a two-edged sword because we do think really, really big. We've oftentimes done things that maybe we shouldn't have. And I think about trying to outcloud the cloud or outdo the edge with the edge providers. And so where we've tried to channel that energy is a lot more around what we do know, which is our industrial businesses, be it healthcare, power, aviation, and winning on top of amazing technology versus trying to do everything.
I think that oftentimes when we talk about digitalization and digital transformation and ecosystems, we're too laser focused on the technology piece. We've already mentioned that it's about people. I mean, ultimately the goal of any digital ecosystem is to enable people to make better decisions more quickly, right? So let's make digital real for real people. And ultimately, oftentimes the cultural part of digital transformation is the most difficult because as creatures of habit, humans are averse to change regardless of whether or not we see the value. So it's important to define at the top level what your strategy is going to be and then focus down on individual quick win areas with the idea that you have a reusable toolbox. I had a conversation with a CTO from an IPP from a foreign country, and we were talking about their vision, and he says, I really want to avoid a digital spaghetti. And I thought it was a really great way to put it. If you go out and you do all these amazing science projects, because there's an unlimited number of things that you can do with digitalization, But you need to start with the end in mind and make sure that you're doing it with this sort of an enterprise toolbox approach, I'll call, so that things that you create in these science projects are scalable across the organization.
How do you measure the ROI in these digital transformation efforts? So let's start with you and work back down towards me.
Sure. If you don't start with the business drivers, you're destined for failure, right? So I think that if all of our customers look at it, they participate in different markets in different capacities, they have different operational requirements, they have different risk tolerances. So the first thing to do with your digitalization efforts is to focus on the business results to start with. So for sure, you know that if I improve this area, whether it's around predictive maintenance, or if I improve this area around safety, there are measurable economic returns for that. So make sure that when you start your digital projects, you have an idea of what are the biggest business drivers, and you use those as your primary focus. When you get those wins, senior management will love you, they'll give you more money to do more things.
So ours, we start with the traditional 10 to 1. Every time we invest $1, we look for 10 back. But we go quickly past that, and two I'd highlight. The first is for every 10 times we touch one of our customers, we measure to this level 9 times we serve and 1 time we sell. And we find that's a very unique ratio that a lot of people aren't honoring today, where they want to talk about how fast their thing is, how important it is, how groundbreaking. We find by bringing a best practice, bringing an insight, just showing up with an attitude of serving is very differentiating. The other piece is the number 3. I challenge every member of the team, including myself, touch 3 people every year. They get a promotion in their job as a result of what you were able to do for them. And maybe not 100% of what we did, but you'll find the most amazing thing is when you're helping people go ahead in their career, coming to work's a lot of fun. And the stories you hear along the way, I just paid off my house. I just sent my daughter to college and didn't have to borrow a dime. You were a part of that with what we do really well. So we find those are 2 ROI metrics that most people don't measure that have served us really well.
If one of the metrics is paying off your mortgage, I'd like to come work for you in your digital transformation plan.
We should talk.
Okay, great, yes. Azita.
And I'll start buying more houses. To me, just like digital transformation to me is a more of a holistic thing for the business, and then it comes down to local implementation. The ROI, most people think of it as every digital transformation project as its own profit center. And again, I think that cuts it a little too narrow, because if you think about digital transformation as sort of number 1, to serve your customer better, and then also streamline your business. So, you know, I was in a company that had 200 AI projects running, right? And each one was claiming this high 10x returns. And I was like, well, if it's true, then the company should have been doing really, really well, right? But it's kind of like this, this fallacy that if you have just one objective in mind and it's a local objective, it's kind of like, I call it the ROI balloon syndrome, right? You streamline, you lower the cost this side of the balloon, and then the cost rises somewhere else. So in order to avoid that, I think the way you look at the ROI is in multiple layers. And I could see at least 3 layers. Number 1, no matter what kind of digital transformation initiative you have, whether it's factory automation, or it's supply chain management, or it's some digital marketing or customer care chatbot, number 1, how are you directly or indirectly serving your customer better using these tools? Number 2 is, how is it helping with the overall corporate agenda of digital transformation? And number 3 is, how are you locally getting returns on your investment? So those 3 has to be in balance.
I agree with everything that was said. The fact of the matter is that whether it is digital transformation or in particular technologies like AI, the cost of engineering systems to collect data, transmit data, store and compute, there's a very big cost to it. And typically there is a tendency in the hype cycle to spend a lot of money. So it's important for us to work on the other side of the balance sheet simultaneously. And hence, before we start any project, really talking about what the impact is and being ready to shut them off if there is no impact. And I also agree that that may be my company, 200 successful projects. But after a while, when you start scaling these things out, it becomes even more difficult to actually track ROI. Hence, having continuous success stories becomes more and more important afterwards.
For each of you, I'd like to know, how are you getting your company or your clients and customers to embrace AI and integrate it into their digital transformation? Staff, technologies, et cetera. Azita, you want to start?
Sure. So number one, for me, again, because digital transformation, which is AI is a huge component of it, starts with realizing that it's about customer obsession. So that leadership principles that have customer obsession is very important. So that's kind of like a basic training for everybody on that, and for leadership to really mean it, not just say it. Number two is some sort of basic AI training for everybody and make it mandatory, right? So if it's 3 hours, 4 hours of videos or courses or whatever it is, and I've seen a lot of companies do it in a very successful way. So everybody has some idea of what is going on. And number three, there is nothing wrong with doing some POCs with AIs and so forth, but that's not digital transformation. Just remembering that that's just experimentation, which is fine and it has its value. But you haven't transformed until you do the bigger job, which is much harder, but you still have to go do it.
Rahul, you want to go next?
Yeah, so at Bosch, we started our AI journey, I think around about 2009-10 timeframe. First few years we spent in creating these success stories, commercial success stories. And at some point we decided that this really works, the technology works, we need to make a much bigger bet. So Bosch actually put aside around, I think, $350 million to set up a Bosch Center of AI with primarily 4 objectives. Firstly, continue to apply state-of-the-art AI to solve problems that we can solve today. Then invest in research, where we look into topics or problems we cannot solve today, like was mentioned earlier in the day about explainability and robustness and so on. There are challenges which makes it difficult to really deploy AI at large scale, so focusing on that piece. Third is about reskilling our workforce. We have 400,000 people, and as we move from handcrafted software to AI-driven software, we need to change our processes, tools, and the skills that we have in the organization. And finally, modernizing our tool stack, tech stack, platform, and so on and so forth. So these are the 4 main pillars of how we try to drive AI at Bosch.
I really like that both of you so far have mentioned reskilling the staff, mandatory training so they understand this new programming paradigm, reskilling the staff. Andrew and Ben, can you add to that?
Sure, I'll go next. So Siemens has been doing first principles-based engineering analytics for our customers for 2 decades now. We've really seen an explosion in the last probably 2 to 3 years of internal demand for data science tools to have access to those data sets. Traditionally, they were stranded behind the firewall, and it was difficult for everyone to access those. So we are actively working right now on creating a toolbox for our internal data scientists and subject matter experts to collaborate. In order to have a meaningful machine learning algorithm, you need 3 things. You need a platform, you need a data scientist, and you need a subject matter expert. We are very interested in being able to sort of democratize machine learning such that we can bake as much as possible of the computer science and the data science piece of it into it to allow more easy access to it. So if a subject matter expert was familiar at a very basic level with the different types of algorithms and what the results of the models could be, then we want to be able to empower them to be able to add to that and then eventually open that ecosystem up to customer subject matter experts as well.
So 2 specific examples. The first, I'll point to our engines. Every engine, when it goes on wing, has a birth date, and we created about a decade ago a second birth date where a digital twin's born. And from that date forward, everything that engine encounters, where it flew, how it was flown, is tracked not only on the engine itself, but also in our digital twin. This has allowed us, with some operators, to reduce by 50-55% the amount of on-wing removal that just was unplanned. Massive savings, because at the end of the day, the airline's running more efficiently, and we know when a plane's landing in a desert a lot, it's probably going to brake faster. When it's not, it's probably not, as a real kind of simple principle. We took it a step further, and you think about the big events that impact a traveler. One, I'll say a hurricane. So a hurricane's approaching the southeast. There's a lot of airplanes in Houston. That problem was typically a lot of really, really smart people running a lot of really, really ad hoc math, looking at everything from where do these planes need to go, what union rules do I have to abide by, what crews do I impact, what passengers do I impact, how much revenue am I going to lose, and it was a hot mess, to use a word from the southeast. We created a series of algorithms where there really is a red button now where we allow them to put the energy into serving the customer, caring for the crew, caring for the pilot, not running math, and coming up with an ad hoc best answer to that disruption. So those are two examples we're seeing AI really change the way our customers do business.
So we just had a presentation right before we came on about 5G. And I just hosted an event in Austin last night that was all about IoT. We know these technologies are all interrelated, but to differing degrees for differing purposes. So I'd like each of you to talk about how important, whether it's important, and how important each of those is to your company, and in Azita's case, her customers and clients, IoT and 5G. And I'd like to start with you, Andrew, because I already know the answer from your opening from the last question.
Actually, I may surprise you on this one. So a couple weeks ago, we announced with Bombardier, a very, very large OEM of airplanes, primarily business jets, that we are putting a brain, an HMU, a health monitoring unit, for free inside of every one of their airplanes to connect with their operators in a much more efficient, a much more effective way than they ever have. That's going to show us a whole lot about diagnostics and how to fly the airplane better, but it's also going to allow us to communicate in the cabin in a way that never has before, i.e. with 5G. And so this is something, frankly, GE never even dreamed of 10 years ago, to do a business model where we would, like your cable company, send boxes for free to then allow Bombardier to do more service on the aircraft in a much more predictive way, and the operator to get a much better experience from everything from a flight plan to streaming a movie while they're flying over the Pacific. Actually, one of their operators just did a direct flight in a business jet from Detroit to Sydney without stopping. So this is the kind of range they're taking business jets now, and we're excited to be a part of that.
So can you just elaborate a little bit on the IoT components of that and where you think you're breaking new ground, and whether 5G plays a role in that on the ground only, in the skies, et cetera?
So in the buzzword edge device, we are putting a very, very edge device in the airplane that weighs a fraction of what we would have put in there 5 years ago. We achieved this with the joint venture we actually did in Miami, Aviation. They're just wizards at how to make hardware resilient, because putting on an airplane takes a long time, as it should, to get all the regulators to approve it, bless it, and say, go do this. So it is an edge device we are putting on every airplane to stream data up and down.
Ben, you want to go next? I'll come
Sure.
back to you, Azita.
So when I think of IoT, I think of highly distributed systems, right? And those are going to be of varying numbers of sensors. We may have some that are small, 10, dozen, 100, or we may have systems that have upward of 1,000 sensors, right? Just because we have the 5G fat pipe, as Elise says, doesn't necessarily mean that it makes sense to fill it up for every use case. So we're very aware of there are certain types of applications, high-frequency vibration data, for example, electronic transients, those sorts of things. It doesn't make sense to send that data to the cloud, right? So as we develop our technology stack, it's important for us to have capabilities to deliver analytics on-premise when it makes sense for the use case, and then be able to have that sort of hybrid stack for us to be able to freely pass data and analytics back and forth as necessary to make the best use of the bandwidth. Whether it's 5G, whether it's Starlink, which to me is a really interesting idea, the building blocks to have developing economies, the first one is communications, and then the second part of that is energy. So as we have distributed energy systems, as we have communication infrastructure that's deployed in these, you're going to see an explosion in developing economies that's enabled because they can communicate, because they have access to energy.
You hit a really good point there of not always moving everything, and I heard a great comment on that last night. You know, there are corner cases for where you can't move to the cloud or where it starts in the cloud. But then in between, there's a whole spectrum of cases. And in some cases, it might be desirable if not necessary. In other cases, it might be undesirable. But the speaker pointed out that you don't want your airbag deployed by the cloud. There are certain things that you want done at the edge where the action happens, because no number of nines is enough nines of reliability. It must be 100%. So Azita, you want to talk about IoT and 5G?
Sure. Actually, I had been, I worked in Nokia for 7.5 years. So in terms of telecom infrastructure, I had to talk about how 5G and AI are force multipliers. And the reason for that is, if you think about 5G's three main characteristics, is number one, very, very high throughput, right? At least 10x. So we're talking about going up to 10 gigabits per second peak speeds. Then we're talking ultra reliable low latencies, right? Under 5 milliseconds. So those would work with some things like AI, real-time AI that you need, like remote surgery. And of course, I won't be a beta case for that, but or remote rehabilitation. Everything you can think of where you need that real low latency and high reliability, as you mentioned. And then the third one being massive connectivity. So right now we're talking about tens of millions of people subscribing to Verizon or AT&T, T-Mobile, but then we're going to talk about tens of billions of devices, and the current system, the current network architecture cannot take billions and tens of billions of connections and deal with that. So that's why we need to go to 5G. That's where the IoT comes in. So, but my thinking has evolved in terms of what you need in digital transformation is at least 4 foundational technologies. And it all kind of centers around AI. AI is the most important one, if you will. If you think about the AI as needing lots of data, it needs to analyze a lot of data. So where does the data come from? You have the eyes and ears, like in IoT, right? That's where it goes in and senses all the data and collects it, brings it back. You need the cloud to process it. Now, the cloud could be central cloud, or it could be edge cloud. And edge, we have different edges. We have edge as in device, as in the plane, as in my watch, as in my phone. Or it could be network edge, as in my base station, as in like halfway in between there, right? So there's different kind of edge. But edge is your friend because it reduces latency. And then of course, IoT is IoT, cloud, 5G, and AI. Those 4 bring us to industry, and 4th industrial revolution, and it affects each and every industry.
I once again agree to a lot that was said. The only one thing I would stress more on is what Ben mentioned earlier about smart data selection. So it's not possible, and in some cases not desirable, to send all of the data back to the cloud. For latency purposes, we are in the business of deploying those airbags, and I know really that we cannot. We are also working on technologies using actually AI to smartly select the data, which should be sent without sacrificing any kind of accuracies when the models are deployed back on the edges. So I think this technology, I see a lot of potential going forward for edge computing.
So one of the things we've all alluded to is the importance of data in this, and AI for helping us understand it and make predictions about it, IoT for collecting it, 5G for moving it around. But we all know, possibly within our own companies, certainly within some of our customers and clients, that people have data silos. These data silos, in some cases, were there for good reasons. It didn't make sense if all you had was a database to have one database for marketing and maintenance and production. That was be a lot of tables and schemas and ontologies. So silos made sense for access reasons, simplicity, et cetera. In the era of AI, they really don't make much sense anymore because there's the ability to find patterns across these data sets that maybe even no human would have found. We're finding that a lot of our customers are having some difficulty in breaking down the silos. What are you doing in your company to break down data silos while not risking external access to the data, but to internally help your teams access and use more of the data for AI? And why don't we start this one down in the end with Ben?
Okay, sure. So data governance is probably one of the most underestimated parts when people look at their stack for digitalization. And the ingestion, harmonization, creating the easy access for all that, that's often overlooked until you get really down into it when you realize I've got 4 dozen disparate systems. So for us, cybersecurity, of course, is in the forefront of everything we do in digitalization. And Siemens has a very rigorous cybersecurity standard. We apply the same cybersecurity standards to our internal networks as we do to our cloud-based platforms. So we meet the same rigorous standards for the most private levels of data inside of our cloud platform as we do for behind the Siemens firewall. So for us, it's imperative that we keep our customers' information private. We have mechanisms for authorization and authentication that allow our experts to have access to multiple silos of data while protecting the individual customer's access to just their silos.
You want to go next, Andrew?
Perfect.
Sure.
Yeah, if you look at all the steps to pull oil out of the ground and turn it into jet fuel, it's pretty amazing. And so this paradigm was kind of hit us between the eyes of if we would take that many steps to fuel one of our engines, and we run around saying data is our most valuable asset, why aren't we doing something even close to that? Because early on, we were just dumping it for the sake of dumping it into a data lake. I applaud our chairman. 3 years ago, we started a corporate-wide initiative called the Digital League, and every one of us went through the Digital League. There was levels of certification, but the big takeaway is we don't run meetings anymore out of my spreadsheet, your spreadsheet, my opinion, your opinion. We log into the Digital League, and we show, and this is very rudimentary, but we show the same data to make decisions, not opinions and kind of black magic behind the scenes. Not perfect, and a lot of things we got to figure out, but that was a big step that was sponsored by our chairman, not sponsored by IT or engineering or one discrete function.
I like that step, forcing people to use the shared data as opposed to allowing the meeting to progress with everybody bringing their own copy of it to it. Azita, I'm going to hold off. I want you to go last because you have multiple customers and clients. So Rahul, I want to have you go next on this one.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because, as I said earlier, the cost of breaking data silos, unfortunately, is really high. That's what we learned over the last years. And some companies have done a really good job at not letting anyone else access their data, without naming those companies. And so this creates a big challenge for us. So what's really important is as we move this data into the data lake, we always try to do it in the context of a driving use case where we get immediate benefits. And so the lake actually gets formed while we are solving problems and not the other way around where we actually try to pull together. I mean, a company the size of Bosch has so much data everywhere that if we try to put everything together before having any ROI, this will be a big problem for us. So that is one piece of the answer. The second is, in terms of the trade-off between security and getting data access, yes, we also follow a lot of state-of-the-art, let's say, processes and access control mechanisms and so on. One technology that I think will help us in the future a lot is homomorphic encryption, searchable encryption. So the ability of being able to work with data in the encrypted domain without the data scientist really having to look at all of the data. And this is very important when we are talking about HR data, compensation data, this kind of stuff. You don't want the data scientists actually to have all access, but you do want them to get some interesting information out of it.
Azita, you want to wrap it up on this one?
Sure. I think that, first of all, that's the most important question when you do a digital transformation, is to see how you're going to break the silos and how you make sure that your experiments are not creating new silos, right? Because the data every experiment is creating a new data architecture. So that's why the vision and the strategy, there needs to be some sort of enterprise-wide data strategy, and the experiments that you do locally has to align with that data strategy. So while you're trying to break the silos, again, you're aligned with the overall vision. And when it comes to security, given that we are moving more and more into the cloud, so we are kind of increasing, and all these IoT devices that are everywhere, so we're increasing the attack vectors, we're increasing our the attack surface. So while we need the sort of traditional security things like the firewalls, looking at malware signatures, deep packet inspection, all of those are important, but they're not enough, right? Because you have a much more dynamic system. Like, for example, in telecom, with the networks, you know, the network could be in clouds all over the place. So what you need to do is really use AI, sort of AI-based security, sort of have a baseline. What does a normal look like? And what do anomalies look like from this normal?
We're in the lightning round now because we have 10 seconds left. So I'm going to ask each of you very quickly for your top lesson, your top recommendation you would have for a company undergoing digital transformation. 10-second or less answer. Go, Ben.
Okay. So I would say define your strategy first, identify the things in your business that deliver the most value. But then I had a customer who called it start small to win big. For them, it was just optimizing the truck routes for some of their services that delivered real economic value. So when you get those quick wins, when you can deliver value and show it to the upper management, you can always get buy-in to get more money and scale up from there.
Andrew.
I would just echo, think small to go big. We started very laser focused around safety, actually, not predictive maintenance. And we woke up one day, we had 49,000 years of flight data that we're trusted with.
I would say the CEOs and the CXOs have to be committed to it, all of them, and the board has to keep them accountable and have an overall strategy from the top. So the strategy is top down, but the implementation is bottom up.
Great point. Rahul, bring it home.
Start small, create success stories, stay away from the hype.
Great. Thanks to our panelists. Everybody, please give them a round of applause.